Hello, thank you all for joining today's webcast held by Birkbeck University of London and Bizagi. We have quite a large attendance today with up to 1,000 attendees, so thank you all for joining today. We've got the great pleasure of having James Smith, Director of Process Improvement at Birkbeck University of London, here with us today, who's going to be discussing with you in great detail the journey Birkbeck University took as they embarked on their Operational Excellence programme, how their corporate objectives were met, and in their own words, the challenges, obstacles and solutions they came across throughout the project. So we're aiming for this session to be approximately 1 hour, with room for questions towards the end of the webcast, where James and our team is going to be on hand to answer any questions you may have today. So today the agenda is that we're going to be covering how Birkbeck University deployed 3 processes in less than 12 months, empowered staff to instigate their own process improvements, enabled self-service for 30,000 students per year, and improved its student amendment process by 90%. So, prior to going ahead, we're just going to be making this session a little bit more interactive, and we're going to be giving you a poll where we'll be particularly interested in your feedback as to what you feel are the most important elements of a BPM initiative. Following the webcast, we'll have a final poll to summarise your thoughts, which will be shared collectively in our Q&A blog, which is going to be posted in the next few coming days. So, those that are here with you now, you're going to see in front of you a question with 3 possible answers, which we're just loading up for you now. So, to start, if you could all make your current selection, that would be great. So you have 3 questions. One question, which is, what is the most important element of a BPM initiative? Is it A, technology, B, collaborating business with IT, C, finding ROI quickly? So I can see lots of you are actually giving me your answers now. We're probably going to give it another 30 seconds just to let all the others actually make their findings. So again, the question is, what is the most important element of a BPM initiative? A, technology, B, collaborating business with IT, and C, finding ROI quickly. Fantastic. Okay, so thanks very much. So initially we've got our results where a lot of you have stated that collaborating business with IT, over 75% of you have stated that that is the most important element to you in a BPM initiative. Now this session is going to be recorded, so for those of you who'd like to view it again or share with your colleagues, that will be made available to you and the slides will be shared with you in the next few coming days. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to James, who's going to get us kick-started.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I panicked when I saw those questions. I thought, oh, do I know the right answer? And of course, there isn't a right answer. So as Jazz said, my name is James Smith. I am Director of Process Improvement and Corporate Information Systems at Birkbeck University of London. And I'm seeing whether I can move the slides on. Yes, I can. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce myself and a little bit about Birkbeck and then talk to you about our business process management journey with Bizagi. So I'll try not to bore you too much, but I think it's interesting, or I hope it's interesting, but I think it's probably useful in understanding what we've done with business process management if you understand a little bit about where we're coming from. So I won't assume that you all know who Birkbeck are, although our marketing department will probably be delighted if you did already know who we all are, but I don't imagine you do. So Birkbeck is London's only specialist provider of higher education. The legend has it that on the 11th of November 1823, this chap on the screen, George Birkbeck, called a meeting in the Crown and Anchor Tavern on the Strand in London to discuss providing opportunities for higher education for London's working population. And although we just called a meeting in a pub, 2,000 people apparently turned up to discuss the issue. And this is an anecdote that's still held up today to prove that it's impossible to plan. I hope that that's not true. So 2,000 people turned up, and the London Mechanics Institute was born, and it was later renamed Birkbeck College, and we're a member college of the University of London. And to this day, our mission exists to provide higher education opportunities for London's working population. Now that makes us quite different to the rest of the higher education sector in the UK, because our undergraduates are typically in their 30s. Our postgraduates actually, strangely, are a little bit younger than our average undergraduates. Our students are being taught in the evenings. 50% of our classes start at 6 o'clock on a weekday evening, and the vast majority of our students have been working all day, and they've come across London to come and sit in one of our classrooms and be taught to attain a University of London degree. That, as you can imagine, presents a completely different set of issues than a typical institution would have if they've got a bunch of 18-year-olds from school who are just there from 9 to 5, 5 days a week, doing a normal university degree. One of the things about being different means that we tend to be adversely affected by changes, potentially more so than other parts of our sector. So some boring stuff here about our drivers for change, but they were boring / frightening to us. In 2007, the then government withdrew funding for people studying for qualifications at an equivalent or lower level to that which they'd already achieved. Lots of our students are mid-career, and they're seeking to change direction mid-career. They might be doing another qualification at the same level because they've decided to change direction. Government withdrew all that funding, and we lost 40% of our HEFCE, which is the Higher Education Funding Council for England, teaching grant overnight. That's a lot of cash to lose, and presented a big problem to Birkbeck. And we undertook a strategic review of our organisation and our operations, and we restructured. Then in 2012, the current government changed the funding landscape again, and we had to again respond to, at this point, much higher levels of tuition fees, and indeed tuition fee loans for part-time students, which hadn't previously existed. One of the things that's then followed on from that is there's been a massive downturn in part-time student numbers. As an institution who are predominantly focusing on providing part-time higher education, this is of course a problem. And following on from that, the government have realised that this is a problem, and it's not a great thing to happen to the reducing part-time student numbers in that way. So they've given us, through the Higher Education Funding Council for England, some funding to investigate ways to address that sort of decline. So the broad message is lots of stuff's changed in our sector, and it's particularly affected unusual providers like Birkbeck, and we've got to do something about it. One of the things that I don't think is particularly unusual about Birkbeck is the way the organisation has evolved over time and the way it works with its business processes, its customers, and its data. I tongue-in-cheek labelled this slide "Welcome to Silo Land." I'm not particularly trying to bash my colleagues, but I think this is a relatively truthful representation of the way Birkbeck certainly was a few years ago and still is in part, and I don't think it's particularly out of the ordinary. I think lots of organisations are like this. We have a number of central services that operate as little silos. We've got, I put on here estates, finance, HR, registry. If you don't come from a university background, registry, sort of like our customer service department. They'd hate me for saying that. Our library. We have a number of schools that actually provide the teaching to the students that rely on the central services, and then we've got staff and students who interact with our schools. However, or rather, each of those central services relies on 1, 2, 3 corporate systems that holds their data. So we've got a system that manages our estates infrastructure. We've got a system that we use for managing our finance. We've got an HR payroll system. We've got a student record system that the registry look after. We've got a library management system. And they are looked after predominantly for the benefit of those silos. Then, of course, we have processes that cross the organization. And historically, that has looked a little bit like, I was going to click on the screen and it's not worked. Let's try again. Maybe Jazz can do it. There you go. There. That looked a little bit like this. We have a shed load of Excel spreadsheets, CSV files, emails, sadly in some cases still paper, that fly around the organization from department to department, providing, if you like, our current process management system. I think we can probably all relate to that. I imagine most organizations have that to an extent. That's not a particularly good environment for trying to make processes happen more efficiently. And in the world that we now live in, it's incumbent on us to improve the efficiency of our processes, both in terms of operating more efficiently. If somebody takes away a load of your funding, you haven't got much choice but to try and operate a bit more efficiently, or a lot more efficiently. But also, we're now operating in an environment where we've got students paying several £1,000s a year for the benefit of studying with us. We've got to operate more slickly. And we need our processes to operate more slickly. And this sort of issue that I'm highlighting is a problem when we're trying to achieve that. So what did we set out to do? So in order to address that, we launched an operational excellence initiative. And our operational excellence program is designed to do a number of things. It's designed to surface the concept of processes, in effect. There are lots of people who are operating processes, but if you ask them what they were doing, they wouldn't say, I'm operating a process. So what we've been trying to do is to define our high-volume processes and then enable them to be automated as quickly as possible. One of the things we need to do is to increase the speed with which we can get data on things. So, for example, if you are suddenly relying on a lot of fee income from the student loans company, it's really important to know which students we're expecting to get student loans from as quickly as possible, so we can start chasing those student loans from the student loans company so we get paid quicker. We also need better quality data because it's far more important to actually get money in the bank than it ever was in the past. As you can imagine, with processes that rely on spreadsheets and emails and things going left, right, and centre, there's a lot of complexity in that. There's plenty of opportunity for duplication. I mean, email is a devil when it comes to processes because lots of people can get copied on emails and you end up with a process rather than following a nice defined path. It turns into some kind of process fractal and goes off in several directions at the same time, spawning copies of itself and wasting a lot of people's time. I think probably fundamentally, though, the last 2 points on this slide, we've got lots of processes across our university organizational units, and we want to be able to recognize those processes across our organizational boundaries and orchestrate them across our organizational boundaries and orchestrate them across our underlying corporate systems. And finally, and particularly important to me, so I wear two hats here. I look after process improvement and I also look after our corporate information systems. And in the recent past, a common response, if you ask somebody how they're going to make their part of the organization more efficient, is to say, well, we'll make it online, we'll make it electronic, get a computer to do it. And of course, they then appear at my door saying, this process which we're running needs to be more efficient, you fix it. And that puts a big bottleneck in the process. And the bottleneck is me and my team, and there's no real way around that other than to empower the business users to come at least some way down the path on their own. And that's one of the things we were seeking to achieve, or we are seeking to achieve in our Operational Excellence Programme. So what did we do? Well, we've done two major things. We've worked with an external facilitator to run business process improvement workshops. So what does that look like? Well, that looks like getting all the participants in an end-to-end process in the room together for a period of time, could be 1, 2, 3 days, depending on the scope of the process. And, well, to start with, to introduce them to each other, because in many cases when these processes are happening and have been happening for years, there can be multiple people involved in the process who don't even know each other. And it never ceases to amaze me how many times we do these things and there is nobody who understood how the process worked end to end. And actually one of the most powerful things of those workshops is we discover the as-is process, and together we map out the as-is process, and everybody sat in the room says, oh, and next I do what this, and the next person says, oh, and then I do that. And we map it out on a massive sheet of paper stuck to the wall. We draw our current process. And then we identify opportunities to improve that process. And finally, as a group, we come out with an agreed to-be process. We haven't bottomed out all of the detail in that time. That's not possible. But what we have agreed is the scope of that to-be process. In a broad brush, we've agreed how that to-be process should work. And we've developed some kind of mandate for change that involves all the people who are currently involved in the process. And that's very powerful when you then come to try and implement the new process, because there's some buy-in there from all sorts of parts of the organization to improving this process. Then the second thing we've done is we looked for a software solution to help us manage and orchestrate our processes, and we procured Bizagi. So why did we select Bizagi? Well, we selected Bizagi for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Bizagi provides a great, simple, easy to understand modeling utility. And I think that's one of its core strengths, because we can give this modeler, which you can download off the Bizagi website, and they give it away. But we can give that modeler to all sorts of people across the organization. They don't have to be technical developers, just people who understand the process, and they can draw BPMN processes, and it guides you as much as any software can to draw nice BPMN diagrams, and they all look in a common format, which helps people from different departments looking at them. And we can start to push work that might have previously been pushed towards the technical developers towards the business process owners. We can say, it's your process, you model it. And, well, I'll show you a screenshot of that in a second. And the second part is that it provides a fully managed process execution facility, and that's obviously the meat of the product. But it's based around that nice, simple, easy-to-use modeling tool that that can be used far and wide in the organization. And I think that means two things. I think it means that some of the bottleneck can be relieved by pushing out the modeling to the people who understand the process. And it also means that if the process then is handed over to a technical developer to implement, there's some ownership of that process, because at the heart of what's executed at the end of the day is that diagram that has been collaborated on with the business process owners. And I think that's a powerful concept for building collaboration between our technical developers and our business process owners. And of course, the process execution engine does all the things you'd expect from BPMN. It manages the cases to their eventual conclusion, routing them. It provides your work portal with your work list for the process participants, and it provides a means of integrating with our existing underlying corporate information systems. So, as I say, this Bizagi Modeler looks a bit like this and provides a really nice, simple user interface to allow modeling of business processes. I've just zoomed in on the tooltip that appears when you hover over one of the elements on the diagram. It then highlights the next available possible elements in a process diagram from that element, which just makes it really simple to diagram. Going from the start of this program where, the start of our operational excellence program, where we had quite a range of abilities, shall we say, in terms of understanding of processes and process management. I think we've come quite a long way in quite a relatively short time. We've certainly come a long way for an organisation that's almost 200 years old. We've recently started running some new parts of our administration. We've started to work in new areas, and I was heartened to go to a meeting relatively recently and find a member of staff who'd been brought in, and she was setting up a new part of our administration, and her line manager had said to her, "That's the Bizagi Modeler. That's how we model our processes around here. You're going to be setting up some new processes. You document them using this modeler." I think that's a major step forward for somewhere like Birkbeck. The Bizagi Studio then takes the same format diagrams that can be produced in the Bizagi Modeler and then allows somebody who's a process developer to build an executable process. So, of course, you can then build data models. You can relate your data models to underlying corporate information systems. You can build user interfaces for each of the steps in your process diagram that relate to your data model, and you can turn it into an executable process. And of course, all the other things you need to be able to build: business rules, assignment rules that determine which cases go to which users, and so on. So the first process that we built at Birkbeck in Bizagi was our student status amendment process, which is a funny title. I'm still not entirely clear why it's called that, but essentially that is the process by which our students tell us they're going to change their mode of study, whether they're full-time or part-time. They tell us they want to change the program they're studying. They can interrupt their studies, or they can sadly tell us they want to leave, which unfortunately happens. And historically, this was a paper process. This was going back to my silo land. This is a classic example of one of our paper processes. The student would fill in a paper form, tell us they want to leave, and essentially that paper form would get passed around the organisation, or possibly it would be passed around by email, but essentially it's the same thing. And different parts of the organisation will get informed that that student had withdrawn, for example, and update records in different places. And you can imagine how good a process that was. So we ran a process discovery and improvement workshop with a bunch of people, dozen or so people, and I've just included a few images there to illustrate what that looked like. So, for example, in the middle there you can see a big sheet of brown paper. We covered the wall in brown paper and did everybody's favourite exercise with post-it notes and designed, or didn't design, we documented the existing process so that everybody in the room had a common understanding of what the existing process is. We also actually, for this process, managed to find some data from looking at a selection of paper forms from the previous year, and discovered, to our horror, that the average cycle time for the current process was 93 days, which isn't something I particularly want to shout about. So probably telling several hundred people on this webinar wasn't a very good idea. But yeah, on average, it was taking us 93 days to get from the point where a student had told us they were going to do something to finally updating all of our systems, which is pretty awful. And then we sat down and talked about why that might be, and we identified a whole load of reasons, and we came up with an aspiration to improve it. and our aspiration was to improve it to basically have completed the process within 7 days. And we agreed to 2B process. And that's what we then took and built in Bizagi. So we built a Bizagi process that routes a student status amendment case from a student creating the case all the way through the people who have to approve it and all the systems that have to be updated to its successful conclusion. So our students can initiate this process themselves. So we have what we call My Birkbeck profile, which you can see a screenshot of on this slide, which is the student's administrative online home. And from there, they can say, I want to change something about my enrollment, and they can choose whether they want to interrupt, change program, change their mode of study, or withdraw. And this is all our self-service, our existing self-service environment for our students. When they submit the case on My Birkbeck profile, we call the standard Bizagi web service in the background and create a case of the student status amendment process. And then Bizagi handles that case until it's concluded. So the case is routed to the first user or the first group of users to complete the first task, and then following that, it gets routed through all the users, or rather, it gets routed through all the groups of users until it's successfully concluded. And there are all the knock-on benefits of this. So not only do we make sure that we pass it to all the users in the right order, but that a user who receives a case and thinks there's something slightly odd about it, they can look at the history of that case in Bizagi and they can see who are the other users who have touched this case, and they can see who to go back and query things with. You can see the little screenshot here. You can see the process model, and you can see the route that case has taken traced on top of that process. And of course, you can then interact with the case and do the things that you are meant to do with the case. And lo and behold, having done this, we've managed to make our process 90% faster than it previously was, which we consider to be a major success. So, as I say, our achievements using Bizagi, that process I've just described, is 90% faster than it was. The second two processes that we implemented, or rather the second and the third process, are relating to students applying for funding from the student loans company. And actually, this is where we've started to change the direction of travel in our operational excellence initiative, because we started off saying, well, we've got these processes we need to work through, but stuff happens and you have to change direction. And partway through this operational excellence initiative, the new student loans system came in, and we had a year of the new student loan system, and we discovered we had an issue with students promising to apply for a student loan and then failing to do so, because there was a process where students were applying, telling us they were going to apply for a student loan, and then somewhere along the line not doing so, and then them being a problem with the funding for that student. And we realized that that was a perfect process to use Bizagi to attack. So we then implemented a Bizagi process to pursue a student's promise to apply to its successful conclusion. So a student enrolls, they tell us they're going to apply for a loan, and we've got a Bizagi process that kicks in as soon as they do that, and it keeps reminding them to do it. So it gives them, I can't remember how long we give them now, I think we give them 14 days, and then we send them an email if they haven't applied for a loan. And then we give them another 14 days, and we send them another email, and so on, until the students either apply for their loan or we realise that they're not going to, and then we say, I'm sorry, well, if you're not going to apply for a loan, then somebody else has to pay. And the outcome of that is that the amount of student debt resulting from promises to apply but never materialised reduced 16% year on year from the first year when we weren't using Bizagi to the second year where we were, just because Bizagi was providing us with a regular, reliable methodology where the students who promised to apply for a loan got chased. Nobody had to remember to do it. It happened. It happened the right number of days after them promising, and you can look at the spikes in when people actually come through with their loan applications. It's all related to the dates where the chasing emails have been sent. And there was a third process that actually we use to handle our interactions with the student loans company. So when a student loan company tells us that they're going to fund a student, we have a process, a Bizagi process that kicks in that handles that information from the student loans company and makes sure that all the parts of our organisation that need to know about that find out about that. And those three processes we deployed in our first 12 months with Bizagi. Some other things we've done along the way, we've run a fast fix initiative, which is our attempt to allow staff to instigate small-scale process improvements locally to them. We recognised that we were concentrating on really quite big, chunky processes that were executed across the organisation, and we absolutely want to do that, but we also don't want to miss the opportunity to allow staff to improve processes in their own local area, and we've been trying to support that. Our My Birkbeck profile portal that I showed you a screen shot of is available to all of our students, and that enables them to action their requests themselves online. And yeah, it's accessible to all of our students. And in the first year, I think we closed 3,000 cases of our student status amendment process. So going back to my silo land, starting in silo land, I'm hoping that this is where we are starting to arrive, and it's a world where our corporate information systems are seen less as independent entities belonging to individual silos, but part of our central repository of corporate information data. But what should replace the silos ownership of those systems is an ownership and understanding of the business processes. And within our corporate information systems infrastructure, we have a number of common tiers. We have some common services around identity management, around reporting. We've got a common tier, what we call our My Birkbeck framework, which is that we use to produce our My Birkbeck profile self-service facility. But central to all of that is our business process management tier that allows us to orchestrate, and increasingly will allow us to orchestrate business processes across the organisation. So just some thoughts on best practices. I think number one is absolutely key, is involving business owners across the organisation in technology selection. I think where it's done well, where it works, where it makes a difference is where BPM is seen as a tool for everybody to use. And if you want everybody to use it, you need everybody to buy into it and everybody to be involved in choosing it. There's lots of options out there, and one of the things that's particularly tricky is lots of the people who sell software into silos, so the student record system providers or the finance system providers or the HR system providers, they're all trying to sell those people business process management type solutions that work with their silo-wise solutions, which are attractive to the people in those individual silos. What we've had to try and sell, or we have sold to our internal audience, is that the idea that if we all agree on a common platform, we can achieve so much more. But involving them all in that selection is critical to that. Enlisting support from external facilitators, that for us really was important, and it came as a bit of a shock to me. I mean, I've spent quite a lot of my career improving processes. And I must admit, when we first engaged an external facilitator, I thought, well, isn't this simple? It can't, we just sit down and we work out what the existing processes. That can't be that difficult. Having somebody who is a really experienced facilitator who has no baggage in the organization and can ask ignorant questions about why something is done that way, or what happens next, without everybody in the room thinking, well, of course you know what happens next, makes the initial process discovery so much slicker and so much more effective. I would commend that to you if that's a possibility for your organization. Mapping processes, defining workflows, sharing tasks with the business team is definitely what we're trying to achieve here. With an organization with 1,200 staff, 1,000 staff, I can't remember exactly, we've got a lot of staff, we can't improve all our processes in one go if the work to improve the processes falls to a dozen people in our corporate information systems team. It won't work. We need to be able to share that work, share those tasks with the business process owners. And that's one of the things we are seeking to do with Bizagi. We are quite keen here at trying to get a broader understanding of what we're trying to achieve with operational excellence. It's not something we're trying to do in a cupboard hidden away. We have a high-level program board that's got senior stakeholders on it. We've got a public-facing website. We try and tell people what we're achieving, because it's part of getting technology adopted and new ways of working adopted is people trusting in it, people believing that it's going to work. And I think if we can demonstrate successes we've had, other people who are possibly reluctant to get involved to start with start to buy in, and that makes a big difference. Supporting and mentoring colleagues' process modeling efforts. It's not actually as easy as it looks to design really slick business processes. It looks like you're drawing a few boxes on a piece of paper. One of the things that we've found slightly perverse, but is definitely true, is that less is more in terms of process modeling. The first time you try and diagram a process, you can end up with the most Byzantine, complicated-looking process. And actually, the more effort you put into refining that process, generally the less there is on the page. And sometimes people look at them and think, why have you been making such a meal of that? And you can have spent hours and hours and hours on it to get something really slick. And you need to support people as they're going through that journey. People don't get it always straight away. What we've done with our, we have what we call a Bizagi self-help group. So we've got people in our individual, in our separate business process owning areas, in our central services, taking part in a group where they are, at the moment they're modeling processes, so they've each got processes they're modeling, and we come together from time to time and we share the latest version of the model, and we sit and critique each other's work. And that's worked quite well, because people ask innocent questions about, well, what happens at that point in the process that doesn't seem to work, and that helps people understand and build their process modeling capabilities. And finally, of course, it's recognizing that business process management isn't an IT thing. It's about the whole organization, and it has to be a shared tool if it's really going to work. So that's what I've got to say to you, and I think Jazz has got another poll for you.
Thanks so much, James. I'm sure we'll all appreciate that. That was a very, very insightful journey that you took using Bizagi. Just to kind of summarize everyone's thoughts at the end of this webcast, very, very similar to the first poll that we did at the beginning. What we'd like to do is just ask you the very first question that we asked again, which was, what is your most important element of a BPM initiative? And we just want to check what the thoughts are after listening to James's journey. So those of you that are here, if you'd like to make your selection, that would be fantastic. I can see some of you already taking part already, which is great to see. James, I'm not sure if you're able to add in your input here.
Well, the thing is, they're all important, but I don't think anybody will find it a massive shock that I think And then it's agreeing with what the majority of people thought to start with, that it's about the collaboration between business and IT that I personally think is the most important element.
Right, so we're just going to show you, absolutely right, just as you suggested, very, very similar to what we saw at the first poll. Collaborating business with IT seems to be the most important element of a BPM initiative. So thanks so much, everybody, for giving your feedback there. We've had a number of questions coming through since James has been speaking. So, James, I hope you're up to taking some of these questions. So one of them that actually came through, it's quite interesting, just need to ask you, how long did it actually take you to deploy version 1 of your process? And someone's asked, how many changes have there been since that happened?
Oh, now you're testing my memory. The first version of the process, it didn't take a massive amount of time. Once we selected Bizagi, we implemented our Bizagi environment, which we used one of your consultants to help us install. Once we had a working environment, I think we might have had a couple of training courses over the course of a couple of weeks, okay. And then probably one of our developers implemented the first process in a I don't want to lie, but it was a month or two. And I wasn't necessarily dedicated always working on that process. I absolutely wasn't dedicated always working on that process. But in the course of that month or two, sorry, I should have looked this up before, but in the course of that month or two, I have to say the vast majority of the work is not translating the process into the software tool. Quite a lot of the work is going back to the process and saying, this process doesn't make sense. And it's, anybody who's been involved in any sort of software development knows that actually the coding or the configuration is never the most complicated bit. It's always about understanding the underlying requirements. And that's absolutely still true in BPM.
Okay, great. You mentioned throughout your presentation organisational differences. How did you cope with organisational cultural differences that cropped up?
I think it's about gathering people together face to face. Well, we're an organisation that are all of us are physically located close together, but I guess there are technological solutions to that. But it's about gathering people together to work together on these processes. The temptation is for the people who develop things to say, "I'll just write down what you want to send it to me. I don't want to talk to you." And then the business owners write something down and they send it to the technical people who go, "Oh, get cross and say this isn't clear enough. It's not expressed logically," and send it back with a sternly worded complaining email. And that just breeds misunderstanding and it breeds resentment. And it's not very productive. And I think one of the biggest strengths in what we've done is about just pulling the people who are working on the processes together, be they who are executing the process or be they people who are implementing changes to the process. And that commonly understood process diagram at the heart of it all is a lingua franca, if you like, that all the people involved can relate to.
Okay. We have one of our audience members who's also asked, how were results of the process improvements measured? And that's from,
how are they measured?
Yes, that's from Emil Underwater. That's posted that through.
Well, Emil, it's an interesting question. Bizagi, the Bizagi software is brilliant because among other things, it tracks all of the cases, and it tracks when the cases were submitted and when they were completed and everything that happened along the way. So we can get, once we implement a process in Bizagi, I can see on average how long they take to close. I can see how many are being initiated each day, each month, each week. I can see where the pinch points in the process are. The problem in highlighting the improvements we've made is that the processes that we are implementing in Bizagi were not under any process control before. So we always have a hard job coming up with baseline data to show improvement against. Now, in the case I gave with our student status amendment process, we literally found a box of the forms that had been processed, and somebody trawled through a random sample of a couple of hundred and keyed the data into a spreadsheet so that we had some baseline measure to go against. But it's not always that. It's not always that even that easy, and that wasn't terribly easy to get baseline data. So I think the answer is the Bizagi tool provides it for you for the 2B process or for the newly implemented process. It's finding the baseline data that's a problem.
Okay. We've got another question that's come through, which is, so which other BPM platforms did you look into as part of the selection process?
We looked into, essentially, we looked into the BPM platforms that you find when you type BPM platform into Google at the time when we were looking, so it's probably changed now. But we recognized that we needed something to manage our business processes, and a few people had worked with a few different BPM platforms, but essentially we were just casting our net to see what we found, and we looked at the things you'd expect to see. We found Oracle, we found Metastorm, we found Software AG, we found Singularity, some others that I can't instantly conjure to mind, but we looked at what Google found for us.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay. And we've got Karen McIntyre who's asked, does the tool allow for exception handling or out-of-sequence activities and tasks at the moment?
Does the system allow for exception handling? We can, I guess there's a slight tension there, because one of the things we're trying to do is to stop the process from being executed in the wrong order, which is of course what was happening before all the time. But it is possible to reroute cases administratively outside of the prescribed process. We just don't do it because we don't want to do it. That's one of the things we're trying to achieve in the process. In some of our processes, we recognize that there are points in the process where it's quite likely that something will happen that it's difficult to cater for, and we, in a couple of cases, we explicitly build in the opportunity within the process diagram for something, for more than one path to be followed, and we handle it that way. But generally, for example, our student status amendment process, we try not to deviate from our prescribed process.
Okay, great. Just in the interest of time, we've got one final question that we'd like to ask you. So what advice would you give to someone looking into BPM platforms?
What advice would I give? I mean, I think the biggest advice I would give is going back to the beginning. It's having people in the room who represent all sides of your business process management. The people who are going to have to support the technology, who support your underlying technology at the moment, people who represent the current business processes, and to buy something that all those people feel that they can work with. Because if you just buy a tool that your technical staff like, you will buy something that they can work with, great, but will it actually help bridge that gap to the business if there is no buy-in from the business? We saw all sorts of things that ticked lots of boxes in one area maybe, but didn't necessarily tick enough boxes across the board to get everybody's buy-in. So that's what I'd look for. I'd look for something that your technical staff, yes, that you've got to implement. So you've got to procure something that that actually is going to give you something you can work with on a technical level. But equally, it's got to be something that your business process owners can work with. Otherwise, there's no point.
Absolutely. Great. So we do have quite a lot of questions actually remaining, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to post the remaining questions with their answers on our blog in the next few days alongside the findings from the 2 polls that we've run today. So James, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. If anybody actually has any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact myself or the team in due course. As we said, these slides will be made available as well as the recorded version of this presentation today. So what we'd like to do is we thank you all for listening. Thanks, James, for hosting. And we look forward to seeing you all on the next webcast. Thanks very much and have a good evening.